Jeffrey. So I'm excited to be here. I'm Kim Ellis. I'm a transportation planner with Metro, and today I'm going to share with you the result of a 4-year process to develop our region's strategy to address the greenhouse gas goals that Rebecca described at the very beginning. Our story is one where the flexibility that and being first in the state of Oregon to really tackle meeting the targets that were set for us, there were a lot of things at play that we were navigating through. Not full belief in climate change in some of our parts of our region. Also, the fact that the tools that were being developed to help support the analytical work were still under development as ODOT was developing a statewide strategy. Their statewide strategy work was going on parallel to our work. And we had also just come off of a regional transportation plan update that had really highlighted the need for the region to begin addressing greenhouse gas emissions. And just for clarification, our target was focused on light-duty vehicles, so a very small piece of the pie. It was a per capita target. I'm not sure in California whether they were total or per capita, but our goal was to get to a 20% reduction by 2035 on a per capita basis, but focused on basically vehicles 10,000 pounds or less. The effort, and I would like to acknowledge DLCD staff and ODOT staff for the support and technical assistance, particularly ODOT, in helping us through this, because there was no way, even with all the resources that Metro does have and a really great research center, that we would have been able to accomplish this work without their support. As Rebecca said, in Oregon, there's a long history of linking land use and transportation together. And the good news for us, while we didn't know this when we started the process, that the work that our region had been doing to implement our vision for land use and transportation, the 2040 growth concept, really provided a strong foundation for us to do what was asked of us through this work. This map shows sort of basically linking centers with good transit, walkable downtowns, also protecting farm and forest land and directing growth into the purple and pink areas, while also supporting access to these important industrial and employment areas, which are shown in blue. This vision and all the work that communities and the region has been doing since the mid-90s really set the stage for us to be able to begin this work, but we didn't know that going in, what we were going to learn and how hard it would be for us to actually meet our target. More recently, in 2010, these 6 outcomes were also adopted as things that our region is working to achieve. When the 2040 growth concept was adopted, some of these things were issues that we knew we were working to achieve. Climate change was really not in our thinking. There wasn't a lot of discussion around equity as well, and that's something that I think as we go forward with implementation, we'll need to do more about. But the concept is really about trying to achieve these things in all communities throughout the region and do so in a coordinated fashion. So how did we get to the climate strategy? And I actually brought some copies of a fact sheet that maybe somebody could sort of start passing around on the table. It was a 4-year process for us to get there. And when we started this work, we really didn't know what it was going to take to meet our target. So we did a lot of research. We looked at 144 different combinations of the kinds of strategies that Jeffrey just was describing are included in their sustainable community strategy, and to really get a better understanding of what it would take to get there and what are some potential things that as we move forward into future phases of the project that we might want to explore. Looking at system management, expanding active transportation options, expanding transit, in addition to pricing strategies, including a carbon fee. What we found is, as I said, that our adopted land use strategy that was adopted regionally but is also being implemented in a significant way in every community in the region provided a strong foundation, and that while we could meet the target, we showed that we could meet it, there was no one way to get there, that it really is going to take a combination of strategies to get there. And that this first phase of work really focused on looking at greenhouse gas emissions, but not any of the other outcomes that we were working to achieve. As we moved into the second phase, this work was really regrounding our work in adopted community plans and then working together to identify what are the other types of transportation investments that we would want to look at. And so what our scenarios that we built basically kept adopted land use plans as the base, and then we adjusted our investments for different parts of the transportation system, with our recent trends being basically if funding continues in the way that it is, where we know that we're falling short, a lot of the funding would still continue to go towards maintenance, but we'd have very little funding to expand transit and other options for travel. Our scenario B reflected our financially constrained regional transportation plan, so it did have significant assumptions about potential new revenues in the region. So it is, in some cases, in some minds, a pretty ambitious level of investment. And then our scenario C really looked at, there were a lot of other efforts going on in the region, including TriMet, the primary transit provider, along with SMART, the South Metro Area Rapid Transit District, and the service of Wilsonville area. TriMet was undergoing what they're calling service enhancement plans, and basically tailoring community transit plans for different parts of the region. We brought a lot of that work into our scenario C because it was above and beyond what we had already planned for in our long-range transportation plan, but also included things like a carbon fee, as well as a transition of within the state of Oregon of going to a vehicle miles traveled fee or a road user mileage-based fee in lieu of the state gas tax. So we included some of those new policies in that scenario C, just to see what kind of outcomes we might get from that. It was really important politically in our region and for our process to really stay grounded in our adopted community plans, and so that's one of the themes that you'll hear. But we also found through that analysis, one, that if we continue investing, under-investing in our transportation system, we're not only going to fall way short of the target, but we're going to fall short of a lot of other goals that we're trying to achieve in the region, and that we also, investing, by making investment in the system, we are helping achieve many goals. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So the final phase of the process was just finished at the end of last year with adoption of our preferred strategy, our climate smart strategy, and really led to sort of identifying some future work that we'll need to do as we go forward to further implement. So it is a strategy. As Rebecca said, we were required to not only adopt the strategy, but we're required to implement it. And we'll be doing that going forward and some future planning work. But out of the outreach that we did and other regional discussions, we really identified the importance of basically trying to identify strategies that are accomplishing multiple benefits, where we will need to prioritize our investments in the system while we will continue to work to find adequate funding. We know that we're going to have to prioritize, and so what we try to do through some of our work is show what are those greenhouse gas reduction strategies that are achieving multiple benefits. Also look for opportunities and ways in which to advance social equity within the region as part of implementation. We have more work to do around what that means, but a lot of feedback that we got through the process was not about concerns about the strategies, but how the strategies are going to be implemented in communities as we go forward. And so that's something Metro has a responsibility, ODOT, as well as local governments as they're moving forward. And then really highlighting the importance that this strategy needs to be bold and innovative, and to provide. One outcome of the process was adopting a short list of actions for 2015 and 2016 to really demonstrate the region's commitment that we are going to follow through, not only adopting the strategy, but trying to begin to implement it in meaningful ways through our regional flexible allocation process. Metro is also responsible for grant programs to fund local planning activities, and so some of the recommendations from this strategy were forwarded into and are being discussed now as part of the policy updates for those efforts. We also learned that it's really important to provide flexibility. One of the key phrases for those in the room that have been through the process with me, one size does not fit all. Not every strategy is going to be appropriate in every place, and really it's about figuring out what people are willing to do politically within their community and how they want to work together to implement this strategy. And I think we still have a long ways to go to really demonstrate our region's commitment to following through and what's come out of this process, but I think we have made a lot of progress in building relationships and partnerships along the way that I think I'm hopeful will help put us in a good place going forward. We did very extensive outreach with local governments, but also throughout communities in the region. But I think with our planning process, one of the things that we learned along the way is that we still aren't reaching all of the communities and some of the communities whom these strategies are going to impact most. And so that's another takeaway for us in moving forward is we need to continue to up our efforts and do more. Some of the things we heard at this morning's first session of the day in engaging underrepresented communities and making sure that their voices are heard and are part of the discussion. We did what we could do in that work, but also expanding to engage business community as well, because they're going to be important partners in this. So the final strategy, this is just a diagram showing sort of the 9 key elements. On the right side are the things that we've already talked a lot about, or we've heard in other presentations: implementing our adopted plans, significant expansion of transit, active transportation options, making streets and highways safe and connected, also implementing system management and demand management strategies. Parking was another area in which we already have assumptions around parking policy in the region that are included in our long-range transportation plan. We assumed that in the strategy, but we have more work to do to ensure that we're actually following through to implement that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The last 2 are really important and played out a lot in the last legislative session. One was so basically our target was, in addition to reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that would be or anticipated through state action, to have cleaner low carbon fuels and more fuel efficient vehicles. So we were already getting credit for that within our strategy, and so part of our work is continuing to support the state efforts to make true on that work, and then working really hard to secure adequate funding, because funding is really a big barrier to us being able to realize not only our targets but other goals, as I've said. This graphic just shows the results of the analysis that we did with scenario A, achieving a 12% reduction, and as our target was to get to a 20% reduction by 2035. The adopted plans that we had in our long-range plan as of 2010 achieved a 24% reduction, and then the scenario C that was testing even more robust transit and other pricing and carbon fee policies, we showed we would achieve a 36% reduction. What we ended up with is on the far right, somewhere in between, and really the big difference in between scenario B and our climate smart strategy is really investing significantly more in transit service throughout the region. Another piece of the work that we did was trying to, in a simple way, describe some of the relative climate benefits of different strategies, and also as the policymakers were trying to decide where they wanted to land within scenario B and scenario C, what were the relative costs of implementation. And so this is a very simplistic representation of the potential climate benefits based on some of the analysis that we did using ODOT's Green Step model. That was the model or tool that we used to support our analysis going for this project. The other thing that I'd like to highlight about this work is not only did we use the analysis to really show the co-benefits and really trying to speak to the economic benefits of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's helping people live healthier lives, have healthier transportation choices, but it's also helping reduce delay for freight movement in the region. It's also helping reduce travel costs, not just the strategy itself, but the fact that people are driving less, driving different types of vehicles into the future, that actually translates to lower household travel costs related to vehicles. And this really became an important part of the conversation as we moved through towards the end of phase 3. Another piece that I'd like to highlight is a new partnership that we developed with the Oregon Health Authority. They did a health impact assessment of all 3 of our alternatives and provided recommendations to the process that we brought forward to decision makers as they were considering this work. And that's where you see some of the lives saved information. They used what was called the ITHM model, which I think some of the California MPOs have been using in addition to some other tools. But that was a really important part for us at the regional level to begin integrating health in a more formal way in our analytical process, and we have work to do to continue to build on that as we go forward. This graph is in the fact sheet as well, and it just really highlights sort of basically that our needs are outpacing the amount of resources we have. The green bar represents the estimated cost for implementing the climate smart strategy. The blue bars on the right are what were assumed in our financially constrained RTP that was just adopted last year. And we're right now, scoping our next update to the Regional Transportation Plan. And so we'll take this work and continue building on it. And that's sort of just in conclusion, there's a lot of work ahead for us to go to the next step. And there are things that we adopted in addition to these policy areas. We've adopted performance measures, process for monitoring progress. We have a requirement to report back to the state on how we're doing and implementing the strategy and doing an assessment basically that if we're not on track to meeting our target, why aren't we as we go through each of our long-range transportation plan updates, and then what are our strategies for addressing where we may be falling short. Obviously funding, that's funding is going to continue going forward. We've also been trying to support the state work on the Clean Fuels Program. That was under significant attack as part of the last legislative session. I hope it's not the case in the next session, but you don't know. We're also, as part of our next regional transportation plan update, developing the region's first regional transit strategy. We've had a high-capacity transit, light rail plan for the region that's been in place for quite some time. This will be the first time that we're actually integrating that work with TriMet's work for the bus service and through their service enhancement plans that they've been developing across the region. And then the other transit provider that I mentioned at the beginning, SMART, they're also updating their master plan for transit for the Wilsonville part of the region. And so we're going to work to integrate all 3 of those, but also engage other transit providers that are serving parts outside of our region, but are bringing riders and people within the urban growth boundary. The next RTP update is due by 2018, and not only will we be further implementing the climate smart strategy, but trying to accomplish other things around transportation equity, advancing the funding conversation, and addressing MAP 21 and figuring out how we're going to fold all of the performance measures that we already have with the suite of measures that we identified through the climate smart strategy and respond to what is yet to come from the feds on the system performance measures. So we have a lot of work to do on that. And this is a website. We still have the project materials and a lot of the technical work that there's more detail there that I encourage you to check out if you're interested. The web address is on the fact sheet that was passed out. I'll hand it over to Lauren.